Hi, this is Dan Matson. Please note that this podcast was created several years ago. Some of the links, email addresses, phone numbers, and promos are outdated and no longer valid. If you want to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Once again, that's woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thanks and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats, podcast episode number 3. I'm your host, Dan Matson, and this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to the craft, art, tradition, and history of wooden boats. I'm really excited, folks, because in this episode today we're going to be doing our first interview on Hooked on Wooden Boats. And my wife and I have been at Westport, Washington for 4 or 5 days, just taking a little mini vacation. And did a little research while I was here and found out that the Grays Harbor Historical Seaport is located in Aberdeen on the river. And it's an organization that's done some really cool things, one of which is in 1985 they began the construction of a tall ship, a 112-foot replica of a wooden ship built in the late 1700s, and they built a replica of that boat, and it's used for all kinds of cool stuff. And the other fun thing is that boat actually was one of the tall ships in Pirates of the Caribbean that came out in 2003. So I set up an interview with Les Bolton. He's the executive director of the Grays Harbor Historical Seaport. It's about 58 minutes in length, so it's a little longer than my normal podcast, but I don't really want to break it up into 2 sections because there's so much good material there that I think you'll really enjoy listening to it. So without any further introduction on my part, we're going to go ahead and start the interview. I did go on site to their facility and sat down with Les, and so here's the interview. So it's October 4th, and I'm sitting here with Les. Les, I can't remember your last name.
Les Bolton.
Les Bolton, yeah. Captain Les Bolton. Les is the executive director of the Grays Harbor Historical Seaport. So welcome, Les. Thanks. For taking this time to meet.
You bet.
And so you're Captain Les Bolton. So tell me about the captain title.
Well, licensed ship's master.
Okay.
Don't do that so much anymore. I mean, part of my job is to bring up that next generation. Mm-hmm. So, I lived on board and worked the ship from December of 90 through 92, 93, and then did a lot of relief work, as we'd get somebody new in, or maybe some captain would have to take time out, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But anymore, we've got a real good cadre of individuals that have come up either through the ranks on our boat or have come to us in other ways. Okay. So, yeah.
So you're the executive director of the Grays Harbor Seaport Authority.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about that organization.
Well, actually, on October 13th, it will be our 25th anniversary of the founding of the organization.
Okay.
It was created by the city of Aberdeen with a grand vision, which I must say it's only taken us 25 years to get right to the point where we could almost implement. But we're a municipal nonprofit, so that's it's like the worst of all worlds brought together. We're like an unfunded parks department that has full accountability. We get to pay the state auditor $15,000 to $16,000 a year to audit our books. So unfortunately, we don't get any of that flow-through money. We're not.
Yeah.
We don't get money out of your taxes. So we
So you have to
actually have to
raise your own funding and support from what you do here.
So and a lot of people don't recognize that nonprofit. You're a nonprofit. You're a nonprofit business, and you still have to pay everybody's wages. And now that the organization has grown to the point where we've got, today I've got 21 paid staff. Everybody's got health care.
Wow.
We've got a retirement plan.
Yeah.
And, I've also got another probably 16 volunteers working today. Mm-hmm. And so, we're... our overhead is about $100,000 a month.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's and when you think about a tall ship, it's a city unto itself, and so you've got an electrical generation plant, you've got sewage treatment plant, you got to feed all those people. We just did an analysis. We fed over 38,000 individual meals last year.
Interesting. Wow, that's a lot. So tell me how the Tall Ships ties into your organization, and tell me about the Lady Washington and and that whole story.
Okay. Well, the original vision for Grays Harbor Historical Seaport, the reason that the city of Aberdeen created the Seaport Authority, was to create a destination attraction that celebrated the rich and colorful maritime heritage of Grays Harbor in the Pacific Northwest. And one of the things about the history of the Pacific Northwest is it's big. I mean, big trees, big ships, shipbuilding, that kind of thing. And, there's a lot of museums that have neat little pictures, and you look at the picture and you go, gosh, heck, that's swell. Whereas if you were to stand next to it, you would go, holy smoke, that's huge. And so part of the idea behind the original organization was to create a destination attraction and a home port for two tall ships. And the first one that was built was Lady Washington. She was built as a Washington State Centennial project. And she's a full-scale reproduction of the original Lady Washington that was the first American vessel to visit the west coast of North America, to land in her... She first... made landfall in Oregon, then came up to Washington, British Columbia, and Alaska. She was the first American vessel to visit Honolulu, Hong Kong, and Macau.
Wow. And started trade with those islands, right?
Right.
With the black pearls and the sandalwood trade?
Right. She was she opened up the black pearl and sandalwood trade between Hawaii and China. But at the time when she originally came to the Pacific Northwest, you could trade 3 buttons, or brass or pewter buttons, for 1 sea otter pelt, and that sea otter pelt was worth 1.5 years' wages.
Good.
So you can imagine the volume of the hold of the Lady Washington, which from the cabin sole to the overhead is 13 feet. So if you can imagine packing that area, packed down pelts, how much money was that? It was as if you could sign up and be part of the crew of a super tanker, and you get to pull 1.5%. That is the kind of opportunity it was.
Really?
And so, at that point in time, the Chinese, they called sea otter pelts soft gold. And they were willing to trade silk and tea and fine china and spices at a high value
for buttons.
They traded for sea otter pelts.
Oh, okay.
So you came to the Northwest Coast, you trade with the natives for buttons, for beads, for copper, for what they call chisels, which were actually knife blanks. And iron tools.
Yeah.
And so there were millions of sea otters. And, it was probably one of the first big opportunities to learn the lesson of resource conservation and sustainability. And unfortunately, we didn't pick up on that.
Right.
And so Lady Washington arrived in 1788, and by 1805, the sea otters were pretty well decimated.
Wow.
Yeah, the sea otter trade was gone, but there were lots of whales. So it switched over to whaling.
Really?
And and it was whaling until, the turn of the 20th century.
Yeah. So the original Lady Washington was a wooden-built boat, like
she was
everything
a wooden
was
vessel.
then, pretty much.
She was actually built in the British colony of Massachusetts.
Okay.
Fought as a privateer during the American Revolution. And so the coming to the Northwest Coast was kind of a second life for her.
Yeah.
So,
and she had to sail around the Cape Horn to do that, which was a first for an American ship.
Yeah, sailed out of Boston in 1788 or 1787. In October of 1787, sailed to the Cape Verde Islands off the coast of Africa, and then down to the Falkland Islands, down off the coast of South America, and then around Cape Horn. And from the time that she left the Falkland Islands in the Atlantic until her first landfall at Tillamook, Oregon, was 124 days at sea.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. And it was all celestial navigation, pretty much? Or?
Well, it was celestial and seat of the pants. They didn't even have charts.
Yeah.
I mean, what was... This was, we talk about the great explorers, Cook and Juan Perez and Vancouver. Those guys were exploring the commercial opportunities, the commercial potential.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't just, wow, let's make a chart. They were, how can we get rich? And so those were state secrets.
Yeah, interesting.
And, the part of the reason that the U.S. learned about these state secrets was that the British had a practice of impressment, and they would find an American vessel and say, well, you're a British subject, you're coming with us, and they would just take people off of American ships. And one of the guys that was impressed was a guy named John Ledyard, and he pretended he was just a know-nothing seaman.
Yeah. Because
he didn't want to have them know that he knew how to navigate or that he knew how to write even, because then they would grab him. So he pretended he was a know-nothing seaman. They grabbed him anyway. And so at the end of Vancouver's voyage, everybody had to turn in their journals, because it's top secret stuff.
Yeah.
Nobody knew that Ledyard knew how to write, and he kept a secret journal.
Really?
And after he got out of the British Navy, he immediately went to France and met with Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and tried to convince them to send an expedition to the Northwest Coast.
Really? So based upon that, was that how this first ship came over to Washington?
He wound up doing a lot of traveling. He came back to the United States and met with a number of people in the U.S., still wasn't able to convince people quick enough, and so he wound up going back to Europe and tried an overland. He was going to march across Russia and build ships there and go to the Northwest.
Wow!
I mean, this guy was pretty determined. Yeah. And actually, there's a great book that recently came out by a guy named Scott Ridley called Morning of Fire that does an excellent job of telling the whole story of Lady Washington and her sister ship, the Columbia Rediviva.
Oh, really?
So, high recommendation. I mean, great book.
So what happened to the original Lady Washington? Does anybody know? Or
the second captain on the Lady Washington was a man named John Kendrick. John Kendrick was a threat to the British. John Kendrick wasn't coming in and trading with natives and leaving. John Kendrick was coming in. He was trading with natives, and he owned over 10,000 acres in British Columbia that he had traded with natives for property.
Mm-hmm.
He traded with King Kamehameha and made him a partner.
Oh.
He was a problem. This is a guy that built Fort Washington. I mean,
really? Down on the Columbia River?
No, that was in what is today Clayoquot Sound up on the west coast of British Columbia.
Oh, okay.
And Kendrick grew up around the Hudson Bay Company.
Mm-hmm.
He saw the power of that,
mm-hmm.
and he wanted to see an American company similar to the Hudson Bay Company, so that America could compete toe to toe with the British.
Mm-hmm.
That, one of the people on Cook's voyages was a man named Sir Joseph Banks, who was the founder of the British Secret Service.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow, a big surprise, Captain John Kendrick is having a birthday, and he's got Lady Washington anchored in Honolulu.
Yeah.
And the British vessel Jackal, 52-gun ship Jackal,
yeah.
is also at anchor. Now, in my experience, when boats are at anchor, most of the boats are laying exactly parallel
mm-hmm.
because they all kind of have their head into the wind.
Yeah.
But somehow, the Lady Washington got perpendicular to the Jackal, and while Captain John Kendrick is eating his breakfast on his birthday, the Jackal decides that they should give him a 3-gun salute for his birthday. And what a big surprise to the people on the Jackal that, oops, the guns were actually shotted with grape shot. And, oh God, we killed your captain. Hey, we really feel bad about that. Is that okay with you guys? I mean, Kendrick's got a crew of 11.
Yeah.
A British 52-gun ship has just killed their captain. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was an accident. We all get that. It was an accident. Sure. Right. Yeah. Right. It was an accident. I'm sure.
Oh, my goodness.
And so what happened was the next thing is a man named Howell, who had been involved with Sir Joseph Banks and a couple of his other things, suddenly comes up with some paperwork that shows that Kendrick owed him money. And so Mr. Howell will be taking over the vessel until the vessel makes enough money to pay Mr. Howell off.
So he took over the vessel.
And so he took over the Lady Washington, and eventually he's smuggling. There's an Asian financial crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Big surprise. That's never happened before. Anyway, there was an Asian financial crisis, and there was money to be made smuggling silver into the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were attempting to do that, and their pilot accidentally put the ship onto a sandbar, and Lady Washington was beat to pieces on a sandbar.
In the Philippines?
In the Philippines.
Really?
Yeah.
What year was that, Russ?
That was 1795.
Wow.
I'm sorry, 1797.
1797.
Yeah.
So that was the end of that, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about the modern day in Washington State here, where the
Right.
state decided to rebuild that.
Right. Well,
build a
so
replica of that.
they decide to, the state of Washington, as part of the centennial celebration, decides to build a tall ship ambassador for the state of Washington. And, excuse me, the Grays Harbor Historical Seaport receives $1.3 million in state funding and comes up with another $500,000 from the city of Aberdeen, and then brought in the balance. The total cost of building the boat was about $2.4 million at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so they built the Lady Washington, launched her into the Wishkah River on March 7th of 1989. And
where's the Wishkah River?
The Wishkah River in downtown Aberdeen.
Oh, okay, that really.
So,
okay,
yeah, a tribute.
That was the Chehalis, but it's
no. Well, the Chehalis is the larger river.
Okay.
The Wishkah is a tributary.
Okay.
And so she was launched at that point, and the original vision for the organization was about a $7.9 million vision, but there was only really $2.4 million invested originally. Mm-hmm. And so, there was just it was difficult, and they had a rough start, got into some financial trouble, and in September of 1990, the organization closed its doors for about 3 months. And at that point, I was hired to restart the organization. Huh. And so we did a ground-up restart. And
wow.
99 days after I came to work, I'd convinced a bunch of friends that, this could be the last voyage of the Lady Washington. Do you want to come? And so that was it. We took off on a 104-day voyage, and we brought in $113,000.
Wow.
Which just, it's pretty much, and I have people all over Washington State to thank for that. Anybody that owed me a favor, I've got the Lady Washington. I've got the Lady Washington for 100 days. If you ever thought that you owed me a favor, put together a charter.
Wow.
And so, and this is before cell phones. And so, we're standing in the rain in your foul weather gear with a 3-ring binder, pumping quarters into a payphone, trying to set up the next 2 ports. It was.
So you did a big fundraising trip.
Yeah.
104-day fundraising trip.
Right.
Yeah.
And then from there we went up the Columbia River, mm-hmm. and then we came back into Grays Harbor and then into Puget Sound again. And in 93, we did our first voyage down the coast of California. And while we were in Los Angeles, we got... we were planning on sailing. We sailed down the coast of California, and then the plan was to sail out to Hawaii and back up. Mm-hmm. And we got into Los Angeles, and we got sucked into the 25th century by tractor beams. And Paramount Pictures bought out the entire trip to Hawaii. And we filmed Star Trek Generations instead of going to Hawaii.
Really?
And so Lady Washington was the original Enterprise in Star Trek Generations.
You're
that was
kidding.
our first little movie thing. And then we finished out, spent some more time down in California, and saw that there was some potential down there. Mm-hmm. The weather's better. Mm-hmm. And the previous year, we actually, there was a teacher strike in Washington State. Mm-hmm. And between a teacher strike and some real bad freezing, we had about 2 months of no income. And, the organization at that point, when I took over, was just, we hardly had money for fuel, let alone anything else. And
yeah.
2 months without income was just devastating. Mm-hmm. So the thought that, going to California, we could actually do something. And we were up we were northbound, and we'd stopped in San Francisco. And we were, in those days, we used our cannons, and we fired guns for points. And a gunner got 1 point for every report, every echo, mm-hmm. and 10 points for every car alarm. And so we were sailing along Fisherman's Terminal, and our gunner had just, I think he got like 35 points with the car alarms and all the echoes, and hit it just boom, boom off in the distance. what the heck? And turned around and we looked, and here's this square-rigged ship just coming in under the Golden Gate. And it was like, whoa, holy smoke. Mr. Gunner, load them up, quick. So we load up our cannons, and we kind of heave to, and this other boat comes sailing up, and so then we fall off next to them, and we're sailing along, and we're maybe 25 feet apart.
Yeah.
And, we're smiling at them, and they're smiling at us, and hey, nice boat. And I'm thinking to myself, these guys are smiling way too big. And then I just right at the time I see smoke coming up underneath his rail, and his gunner's got slow match going to light the cannon.
Yeah.
So I can see he's ready to fire his guns, and my gunner's sitting over there ready to fire his guns. And so I said, Mr. Gunner, now! And just as the other captain said exactly the same thing, and, we just boom, 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 and then we took off. And so we sailed for about the next 2.5 hours, just kind of hammering away at each other, trying to outmaneuver each other.
Yeah.
And
so what ship was it?
It was Hawaiian Chieftain.
Oh.
Which is how at the end of the
fleet.
Yeah. Well, and so at the end of the evening, we went back. We were moored at the National Maritime Park, Hyde Street Pier. And that evening, this guy came down and said, hey, that was fun. You want to do that again tomorrow night? Yeah. Okay, sure. And so we started doing that. And then a couple years later, he got a hold of us and said, hey, why don't you guys come down and we'll just partner. I'll handle booking all the education programs. You guys handle booking all the public programs. Mm-hmm. So we got into a partnership with the Hawaiian Chieftain, and we ran that partnership from 96 to 2003, when the owner of the boat had an opportunity to pick up the family farm overlooking the surf break at Santa Cruz, and he needed some cash, so he sold the boat, and it wound up going to the East Coast.
Oh, it did.
And then the guy who bought the boat passed away unexpectedly, and we thought we had a partner here in Grays Harbor, a developer who was interested in partnering and guaranteeing the income for the Chieftain during the summertime. And so we wound up buying the Chieftain and bringing her back, and unfortunately, with the economic downturn, he was overextended, and so we lost our partner. But we still have Hawaiian Chieftain, so we've got the two ships, and that's doubled our fun, doubled our expenses, but it's doubled our income. So as long as we do things right.
So tell me a little bit about the actual building of the Lady Washington, the replica, and give me a little bit of the gory details about the wood and the timber used and stuff.
Lady Washington, as you see her today, is actually 210 tons. She's fur on fur. The original would have been oak, but the cost of shipping oak
on oak.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. I mean, it's what they had.
Yeah.
They'd use pine for the spars.
White oak?
White oak. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You wouldn't. Red oak and boats, it's okay for bits and that kind of stuff, but if it's going to have its feet wet, red oak is not what you want to use.
Yeah.
So we used, almost everything is Douglas fir. There's some things that we have to use hardwood for, like the tiller. Lady Washington steers. She's got her rudder is about 1,400 pounds.
Wow. And
it steers with an 11-foot-long tiller. Most people think, as a matter of fact, that was when we worked with Pirates of the Caribbean, talking to Gore Verbinski, the director, and he said, well, this is going to be historically accurate. I want everything historically accurate. And I said, oh, God, that's going to be such a relief. How wonderful to have a historically accurate film.
Yeah.
And so we get back onto the quarterdeck, and he goes, well, where's the wheel? And I said, well, a boat this size, you could turn this boat with a tiller, and your ability to turn quickly could mean life or death. And so if you could handle the boat with just a tiller, they used a tiller. And so boats up to about 85 feet would have tillers and what they call tiller tackle or relieving tackle. So as you're pushing on the tiller, you're pulling on a twofold purchase, a double block purchase.
Okay.
That's going to help you. It'll help you
in tension.
Right. And so, we explained that to him, and then he looked at me and said, "It's a pirate movie. It needs a wheel."
Oh.
Okay, cool. We can do a wheel. We will do a wheel. So we had to get rid of the tiller, but the ash tiller actually we broke it. When a rudder, you cannot let that tiller get away from you.
Yeah.
I mean, you could get hurt.
Well, how big was the tiller?
The tiller's probably in section, probably about, in the biggest spot, probably about 6 or 7 inches in diameter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
now it's Purple Heart.
Oh.
But 11 feet long, so you've got some leverage. And if you ever talk to someone who's made the trip down the coast on board the Lady Washington and stood a trick at the wheel, and ask them about their bruises. Because the tiller, it's a big boat, particularly moving down the coast in the fall. We usually get into some 35 to 50 knot winds, 18 to 22 foot seas, and so you set the tiller, as the boat comes up into a wave, you kind of break through, you're at the top of the wave, and maybe you're not quite straight. The rudder right now is out of the water, so now's the time that you can push it for where you want it. The boat starts to smoke down the hill, and then the rudder bites and will start to straighten her out, and as she straightens out, you ease off and let the tiller come back to center line.
Interesting.
And the way that you do that is you put your hip against it and let it, push you.
Yeah.
And, as it's doing that, every now and again, it just kind of smacks you a couple times. Huh? Yeah. So, it's just kind of like having somebody bump you with a baseball bat all day long.
Yeah. So the tiller's on the boat today then?
Yeah.
Or the wheel?
Yeah.
The wheel was just for the movie.
The wheel was done for the movie. Yeah. And we designed the wheel, and we told them, they said they were looking we want something special. Okay. So we designed a wheel, provided them a drawing, and we said, well, for $4,500, we'll build you the wheel. Oh, no, we can build it cheaper than that. Okay. So they built it cheaper than that, and the first thing that we filmed was the storm sequence, and the way that they built the wheel cheaper than that was that they built it out of cottonwood.
Ooh.
And the storm sequence, let's see, cottonwood, storm sequence, spraying salt water all over it. Oh, wow, the wheel's coming apart. Oh, where's the surprise in that? Come
so
on.
the wheel came apart.
So, the wheel started to come apart.
And this is in filming of Pirates of the Caribbean.
Right.
Yeah,
and so we said, okay, we finished the filming in Los Angeles, and now we've got to go to St. Vincent. And everybody just said, get that thing off the deck. So that wheel actually has frequent flyer miles, and it's flown from Los Angeles to St. Vincent, and it was on board in St. Vincent. And as soon as we got done in St. Vincent, it came off in St. Vincent, got put on an airplane, flown back to L.A., and then it was eventually flown up here. And we've got it upstairs.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was just great concept. Too bad that's what you chose to use.
Yeah.
But, it's Hollywood. Nothing is meant to last beyond the picture. So.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So were you down there during the filming of the movie using the Lady of Washington? Or?
I was down a couple times. My job is to be a jerk. When you're doing a film, you need people that are going to do whatever it takes to make it successful. And, our guys a couple days, our guys did 2 23-hour days back to back. They got paid for it. They got paid really well, but by Disney, not by the seaport. But the people that are working on set, it's a team. It's a tight team. Everything, whatever it is that you want. But somewhere, somebody has to be able to say, that's not going to happen. And that's my job.
I see.
And so, we put the strongest captain that I had. And then, we'd talk every night. Les, they're still pushing. Tell them I said no. You and I talked about this, and Les is just adamant. It's not going to happen.
So what would be an example of something they'd ask?
They wanted us to replace the engine. We don't think that your engine's going to be strong enough. Our guys looked at it, and they think that we just remove and replace the engine. We'll just drop in a new one. We cut a hole in the deck and put a new one in, just like we did with the Surprise. And I said, one, this is not the Surprise. Don't be surprised about that. Two, you're not cutting a hole in anything. And three, the thought that you're going to put in an engine and we're going to work it out in the end, that's not going to happen. The only way anything happens on this boat is if we know going in what all the costs are going to be, And so, eventually we had to kind of take it up the ladder a little bit. And, and again, not everybody has a role to play.
Yeah.
And so my role is jerk. And so then I finally flew down to Los Angeles and was just adamant that, I'm comfortable with this engine. If you're not comfortable with this engine and you guys want to pay to get that engine rebuilt, I'm okay with that. But that's the engine that we're working with.
They thought it was going to fail during the movie or something? Or
well,
they were concerned
the interesting thing about films is that when we did Star Trek, which is not a big film, I mean, not a whole bunch of people. And when we did Star Trek, Bernie Williams told me, the director, that it cost him $175,000 an hour to have everyone show up at work.
Oh, my goodness.
So when you hear the director scream at the top of his lungs a short string of obscenities about why we're not ready, and the fingers start pointing to the right, you don't want to be the guy on the far right. And so, whenever you're involved in a big project like that, you really have to you have to respect the fact that although they're paying you a lot of money, comparatively speaking, the amount of damage that you could do to that film just by not being ready for 5 hours, to be late. As a matter of fact, Bernie Williams told me that he filmed the movie Bounty with Mel Gibson, and he had an actor that showed up late 3 times, and he said 15 minutes. That's 45 minutes. Do you know what that guy cost me? He didn't cost me anything after that. I fired him.
Wow.
I mean,
yeah,
and
big dollars,
it's
huh?
yeah, it's huge amounts of money. So so we eventually came to an agreement, and they completely rebuilt the engine, and we got a warranty on, and we insisted if you're going to rebuild the engine, you have to rebuild the transmission too. And so we got the engine and transmission rebuilt, which was a good thing.
Yeah.
And
so what does that have for power on it?
Well, it had, at that point in time, we had an 8V71 Detroit with a 3-to-1 Allison gear. And then, 2 years ago, we removed that because there's no... the old 71 series Detroit are not even Tier 1 compliant for pollution control. And so right now, Lady Washington has a 2-year-old Scania diesel with a ZF 3-to-1 reduction.
So it's a single screw boat?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously the original boats had no motors of any kind.
Right, which is why it took 124 days from the Falklands.
Yeah.
I mean, they did have a longboat, so you could put the guys over in the longboat and just have them row.
Yeah.
You know, you can get the boat up to 2.5 knots maybe.
Really?
Yeah. The boys...
they would pull the boats?
Yeah.
From the longboats, they would pull the ship?
Sure. Yeah.
If there was no wind.
But they don't do it like you saw in Master and Commander. Mm-hmm. If you look at Master and Commander, everybody's pulling at the same time.
Yeah.
All the oars hit the water at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, if you've ever towed anything, there's a cantonary with the towing line. You know, it sags, and then when you tow, then the line comes taut. And then as soon as you stop towing, the line sags again. So it's kind of like this rubber band action.
Yeah.
So the way that they actually, if you're towing, you have one oar, the right bank of oars are in the water while the left bank of oars are moving to reposition. When the left bank of oars hit the water, the right bank of oars are out.
So you keep tension on that
And
line.
it's called randan. That's how you do it.
So you're keeping tension on that all the time so you don't get that slack and lose your efficiency.
Right.
Interesting. So they didn't get it right in Master and Commander.
That's one of the few things in Master and Commander that
I got to go watch that again now to see.
It hurt my eyes to see
I've got to go see Pirates of the Caribbean and Master and Commander
Actually, Pirates of the Caribbean, and then listen to the... they've got a commentary section in the special features.
Oh, do they?
And and Johnny Depp goes, God, those guys, I mean, that is just so cool talking about the crew because, as a matter of fact, there's a scene in the bar that actually comes from the boat, and Johnny Depp is talking to his first mate, and he said, take in all and give none back. And that's the command for the mooring lines when you're coming up against the dock. Okay, and we're kind of hold on 3, and you're okay, that's well, we're tight on the fenders, take in all and give none back. And so you just pull up all the slack and make off your mooring lines. And Johnny Depp went over to Brad and goes, I like that. You mind if I use that? No, go ahead.
Oh, that's funny.
Crazy.
That's funny. Wow, this is cool stuff. So let's come back to this organization again. And you were telling me on the phone yesterday about some plans that you have for some property here to make a new facility.
Right.
So tell me about that a little bit.
So, and actually... we're in the process of acquiring the Weyerhaeuser sawmill property in Aberdeen. It's a 28-acre site. There are 10 major buildings on site with over 100,000 square feet of footprint.
Wow.
And we're one of the interesting things about Aberdeen is that we are the largest community in Grays Harbor County. But we do not have any public moorage. There's 0 public moorage.
Really?
There's not a boat launch. We've got some of the best steelhead and sturgeon fishing in the state.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got wild salmon that you can go fishing for. How crazy is that? And and there's no moorage here. We've got, Westport, which is a great marina, but there's you can't, if you come up to Aberdeen, be prepared to motor around and go home.
Yeah.
So our plan is to, build a mixed-use public waterfront facility. We've got an opportunity with a place this big to really do something not just good, but something absolutely exceptional.
Yeah.
We're looking to tell the stories of Pacific Northwest Maritime. to talk about lumber schooners, about sawmills, about shipyards. We have some pieces of the schooner Wawona, some of the major significant pieces of the schooner Wawona, and we're looking to build a full-scale lumber schooner on site.
Wow.
It'll be a land ship. It won't be, because of federal and international rules related to flammability. I mean, it would be logistically, you could build a boat, but you could never use it. As opposed to, we can build something that when you go on board, it will appear that you're going down into a lumber schooner that is loaded about a third of the way full, and you'll be walking on lumber.
I see.
But the reality is, you'll actually be walking into a ship that's set on piles. If you're in the water and it's low tide, you'll be able to look back and see steel frames. You'll actually be able to see her shape from the water.
Okay.
And actually see her full underbody, but it'll be skeletal.
I see. Yeah.
About 2.5 feet below the pier level.
I see.
So. Yeah. And so we're going to be looking at that. We'll be telling some of the stories of the stevedores, the sailors that worked here out of Grays Harbor, and just that whole Grays Harbor's history is a really interesting one. In 1930, the Great Depression, we had 25 sawmills and 28 shipyards working.
Wow.
We were shipping lumber to Australia for the gold rush, for railroad ties and timbers for up in the mines. If you look at the houses on Broadway, on Broadway Hill in Aberdeen, a lot of them have sandstone foundations. And although they could have gotten sandstone from Tenino, which is close, the sandstone actually comes from Australia. And the reason it comes from Australia is they sailed down there with a load of lumber, and the boats need to come back, and they need to come back in ballast, or it's going to take forever. They need something heavy that that's going to allow them to carry a lot of sail, that they can load quick. And so they load up this sandstone, get back up here, and the first thing they do when they get tied up at the lumber mill is offload all that sandstone, and some local guy will get it. It's a low-value cargo. But it brought them back quick. And now they can...
It goes into the houses around here, huh?
Right.
Interesting.
So, there's a lot of just really wonderful stories that we'd like to tell, not only about the cultural history, but also about the natural history. We have the Chehalis Basin Surge Plain Natural Area Preserve. It's like, I think... It's over 4,000 acres of surge plain wetland. And, wow, surge plain, okay, how keen for little animals that live in marshes. Well, okay, that's true. And it does provide food for salmonids and that kind of thing. It also filters pollutants. And probably most importantly for this community is... It is a surge plain. When a flooding event happens, all of this wetland area floods 1 or 2 feet deep, and all of that peat bog there starts loading up with water like a giant sponge. And so instead of water boiling over into the streets and downtown, we've got this surge plain that's actually absorbing a lot of that water. And then as the flooding event subsides, you've got all this wetland area up there that'll slowly start discharging all that water. And how do we convey those kinds of stories? And so, the idea about the site is to create a site that begs exploration from the time that you get there and tells multiple stories that you can follow fairly easily.
When do you anticipate that'll start construction?
Well, we're still in the process. We're working out the final stuff with the state agencies right now. And, it's been this has been a sawmill since the turn of the 20th century. And so there's been a level 1 environmental, a level 2 environmental, and, we're going to have to, there's some lead-based paint in a couple of the buildings. There's a little asbestos, but not much, that we're going to have to resolve. So, we've got to get our plans there. We need a new stormwater permit because we're not an industrial stormwater discharge. We'll be a mixed-use public discharge permit, but you still need a discharge permit. So that kind of thing, making sure that DNR is on board with our plans. So, we're at this point, we're hoping, we were thinking we might be able to close before the end of the year, but now it's looking like it's going to be January, February.
Okay.
So
close on the purchase of the property, or
close on the purchase of the property.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then hopefully, so you'll start construction next year.
We'll start we'll go through a cleanup process. Then we're going to do public tours, and then we're going to go through a public design process. We want to make sure that we create a site that's going to appeal to multiple ages, multiple user groups. And so what are the stories that we can tell? How would you like to see this property used? What would cause you to want to spend half a day there besides a brew pub?
Yeah. Right. Well, cool. That is awesome. So how's funding for that coming? You're doing some fundraising now for that.
Well,
I see on your website.
We're doing a little fundraising now. We've got a couple grants lined up, but we've got to make sure we actually have to have full tenure and control. So, we got to kind of wait for that. But we've got a couple significant grants that are... The interesting thing about the property is that it's a listed priority for public waterfront access. It's identified in a couple different studies saying that, wow, you've got all this resource. Within 6.5 miles of this property, you've got the Grays Harbor National Wildlife Refuge and the Chehalis Basin Surge Plain Natural Area Preserve. Within 6.5 miles of this site, you've got over 40% of the county population. Within 6.5 miles of this site, you have 36 miles of navigable waterway that would be accessible to a vessel of 5 feet of draft or more.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean...
Wow.
They're
prime location.
It's a wonderful location, and when you start to, looking at things like canoe, kayak, or small boat, explorations, you can get... Preacher Slough is a slough that's back there, and it's called Preacher Slough because there was a preacher coming down river that took a shortcut, and he wound up lost in there for 2 days. It goes all over the place.
Funny. So for our listeners, Les, give me some information about your website, what the website address is, and how they can get more information.
Okay. The web address is historicalseaport.org.
Okay.
And that's our general, homepage site.
Yeah.
You can find almost anything from there if you're interested specifically in the spar shop. Spar making, that's thesparshop.com. But like I say, historicalseaport.org. And, one of the things that we get a lot of interest in is, what is it like to be a part of the crew? There's and for those people that are interested in that kind of thing, we do have a program called 2 Weeks Before the Mast, and it runs year-round. Every Sunday, there's one new person that comes on board Hawaiian Chieftain and 2 new people that come aboard the Lady Washington.
Yeah.
And the first person that meets them says, "Hi, I'm you 1 week ago. The learning curve is steep, and you're going to have a great time. And so we're constantly training from ground zero.
Really?
You don't have to know anything about tall ships, about boats. We'll teach you that the pointy end of the boat is that in there, and we call it the bow. Mm-hmm. And if you're facing the bow and you look to the right, that's called starboard. And we just take it right from the most basic level. And at any given time on board the ship, you'll find people that are at entry level, but you'll also find people that are working on getting their mate's license or getting their master's license.
Wow.
You never know who it is that you're running into. You're as likely to find Captain Bill Larson came on board and a 2-week volunteer, and but he's got a master's license, and he's got a PhD in psychology, and he was recently retired from the University of California, and just wanted to get on board a ship. Wow, that's cool. Captain Tommy Cook has an ocean master's license, 1,600 tons.
Wow.
He's single-handing through the Northwest Passage, and he came on board as a 2-week volunteer and has now come back as one of our captains.
Yeah.
But, Captain Esther Whitmore, she turned 16 off the coast of Nicaragua when we were going down to do the Disney movie. Mm-hmm. And when she got back to Washington, she was 16 years old. She had 10,000 miles at sea. And I said, Esther, so what are you going to do now? I think I'm going to go back and finish high school. And so to see Esther, that she came back after during the summer, and so to see this 17-year-old girl teaching a 50-year-old guy or a 60-year-old guy that's got a master's license, this is a fair lead. Okay, a fair lead. All right, so I get that. So then it's that, and then you just belay. Yeah, okay, so let me show you how to sweat and tail. And so, you're as likely to be taking direction from someone in their teens as you are to be taking direction from somebody in their 60s or 70s.
Yeah, all right. So it's a 2-week stint.
2 weeks before the mast, you guarantee that you can stay, that you can and will stay for 2 weeks, that you will serve the ship 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. We guarantee that you can stay for 1 week. We have a 1-week checklist, and if you have any interest in staying, you'll be able to get through the 1-week checklist. Pretty basic stuff.
Yeah.
What do you do if we abandon ship? Which life raft are you supposed to go to? You need to know those kinds of things.
Yeah.
How do you start the fire pump? We start the fire pumps twice a day to wash the deck down. So it's not like you haven't seen it for 7 days. So
is this 2 weeks at sea?
It's
Part
2
of
weeks.
At sea, or?
It's 2 weeks doing whatever we're doing.
Okay,
so right now we've got people that are on their 2 weeks, and they're sailing right today. They're sailing off the coast of California, southbound. But we've had people that came on and did the 2 weeks in the boatyard. The ships actually operate about 350 days a year. Mm-hmm. We're in 45 to 55 different communities in a year. Mm-hmm. We sail almost every day. Mm-hmm. Primarily what we do is educational access programs for school children. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we have between 12 and 15,000 school children a year on board the ships, and then we sail with the public on the weekends.
I see. Okay.
So it
those
really
boats are out on the water a lot.
These are working ships. We put about 6,000 miles a year on the ships. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Summertime, Pacific Northwest. Wintertime, we're down south. We'll be going as south as far as I think Oceanside this year.
Mm-hmm. California.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that about San Diego area?
Yeah,
Okay.
just above San Diego. We may be going down to San Diego, where we've got somebody who'd like us to go down there. The problem in San Diego is moorage.
Oh.
Trying to find a place that's appropriate for us.
Yeah. Right.
Lady Washington is a wonderful boat, but she does weigh 200 tons and she draws 11 feet of water.
Yeah.
So, and she's 112 feet long. So trying to find a spot where you can put her that isn't problematic.
Yeah, right. Interesting.
Can be challenging.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Les.
You bet.
This has been a lot of fun. And,
You bet.
Hope to come down and see you again. And any parting comments for our listeners at all?
Well, feel free to ask.
Okay.
Our organization is about education and stewardship. And, the only way that you're going to be a good steward is if you understand.
Okay.
And so...
how about a phone number and email address, too?
Phone number is, the easy one is 800-200-5239. That's 800-200-LADY.
Okay.
200 years ago, Lady Washington.
Yeah.
Email, the easy one is Les, L-E-S, at historicalseaport.org.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Les.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
You bet.
Well, folks, that's the end of our interview with Les at the Grays Harbor Historical Seaport. I hope you enjoyed that time. As always, I would love to get your feedback on the show. You can call me at 424-261-2360. That's our feedback hotline. Leave me a message. Or you can email me at dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to talking next week. Take care.